The Modi-Xi Jinping bilateral is about to begin any moment now. There are some movements happening in Kazan and we're told from the ground that it's going to be happening any moment now. Gaurav is in Kazan live with me. Gaurav, that meeting slightly delayed it appears, but that's not surprising. But it's going to happen any moment now, Gaurav.
Shiv, that meeting is just about to begin. The Kazan Declaration has been accepted and adopted. After the adoption of Kazan Declaration, the bilateral start, and the first bilateral is with the Chinese President Xi Jinping. So the leaders have just moved out, from the leaders' lounge, from the main hall to the leaders' lounge, and then going in for their bilateral. So the bilateral with the Chinese President Xi Jinping begins anytime now, and it's likely to last for about half an hour, maybe 40 minutes, unless, of course, the two leaders start discussing something and it goes on for longer because it's just the leaders and their interpreters who are there. National Security Advisor Ajit Doval, Foreign Minister Dr. S. Jaishankar, they're all standing by, as is the Foreign Secretary and secretaries there. So we know it's a big delegation on the Indian side. It's an equally big delegation on the Chinese side. Their Foreign Minister Wang Yi is also here. But this would, of course, be the higher direction that the two leaders give to their respective, foreign ministers and teams on the next course of action. That higher direction will be very important. All this conversation about RIC, Russia, India, China, well, it was a good idea when it was, conceptualized and when it was thought of. But you cannot have an RIC when with two of those countries are engaged in a battle and soldiers' lives are being lost. So there is no RIC if China is violating India's territorial integrity, and we are losing soldiers in Galwan, and Chinese are losing soldiers there, and then the Chinese continue to lie about it. They continue not speaking the truth about the situation on ground and say, let's increase our economic cooperation. Borders are something for future generations to handle.
Correct.
Salami slicing of Indian territory. So there is no RIC, is what sources are telling India today, till the time borders are settled. There's peace and stability at the line of actual control. So there has to be stability at the borders, not just disengagement. It has to lead to de-escalation. It has to lead to de-induction. The kind of infrastructure that you and I have been reporting and our entire team has been reporting, that kind of infrastructure that China is building at the LAC clearly is not a short-term goal. Their disengagement is very strategically poised before every summit, whether it's a Brics Summit at Xiamen, when that Doklam disengagement took place, or an SCO Summit, or when India shows strength. When India shows strength, like the QPQ operation on the south bank of Pangong. So that's when disengagement happened on the south bank of Pangong. So it's just this gap that India needs to fill over the next several years, ensure that we are better prepared at the borders, we have better infrastructure at the borders, and then China realizes, look, China respects strength. China also respects that if there are no gains, if there is dividend from peace, then China will invest in peace. If there are dividends in conflict, then China will continue to escalate this conflict. And that blow hot, blow cold policy of China can only be dealt with when India increases its economic strategic strength at the borders and, of course, the state of our economy.
Gaurav, I'm going to come back to that point on India's consistency through this entire period. Even Sana mentioned and referred to that. But I quickly want to first ask you, Gaurav, about the meeting itself. When the bilateral happens, are you hearing about what the bilateral could involve? What could be on the table between the two leaders? I know it's difficult to speculate, but are you picking up anything? Also, will there be some kind of a joint release, a joint statement of any kind after the two leaders meet? Any clarity on those 2 points, Gaurav?
So there will be a press conference by the Foreign Secretary, Vikram Misri, we are told, immediately after that bilateral. And we've been told to be there for the press conference in that meeting room immediately after the bilateral is over, because the Prime Minister then has a series of other quick pull-asides and bilaterals, and then he planes for India later this afternoon. He'll be in India closer to midnight tonight. So, yes, we will know details of what transpired and what they want the two sides to know. Point one. Point two, is there an agenda of this bilateral? At least it hasn't been put out in public domain. The two sides have remained engaged. You remember last 3 days you and I have been talking very extensively. Will there be a pull aside? Will it be just a pull aside? Will it be a proper bilateral? What's the agenda of the bilateral? And diplomats we spoke to constantly, they kept saying, wait. Yes, it will happen. We are just working out the time. The moment that time is sorted out, we'll let you know more details. So in about an hour from now, Shiv, there will be more clarity whether this was restricted just to easing the situation at the borders, or does it also entail, India getting greater access to the Chinese market? That's something that India has been wanting for quite some time, and whether this leads to stability in that relationship. So far, there have been no indications, no positive indications that there could be something wider, strategic that could emerge from this. There could only be some tactical gains, but then you see now India has also learned to keep our expectations very low when it comes to an India-China standoff at the LAC.
And Gaurav, one final question before I let you go, only for the moment, so you can speak to people on the ground. But, while we manage expectations, I think you and I can both agree that we must always acknowledge the consistency that has been shown by the Indian side, whether at the military level, and especially at the diplomatic level in the last few months and years, over simply refusing to engage in any kind of bilateral activity until China really in some ways visibly demonstrates that it is intending to move towards a more conciliatory posture on the border. And I think we need to take our hats off to India's amazing Foreign Office and diplomatic team for having brought us to a point where this bilateral is possible. Because even if we don't know what the details of those concessions are, the very fact that India has agreed to this bilateral means that there is something that has happened, Gaurav.
Shiv, you're absolutely right, and there are multiple factors that go into this. Do keep in mind, you and I have reported this from ground zero in Ladakh. China only respects strength. So when India did a quid pro quo operation, when India started dominating the Chinese Moldo garrison, when India was dominating the G219, that's the only situation when the first disengagement happened. And that was when the two countries had their tanks virtually 50 meters from each other. An accidental shot fired could have led to massive escalation, just as the Galwan incident almost did. So that's step one. Step two, extremely crucial. The subsequent disengagement only happened when India wasn't very clear. India wasn't giving any clarity on whether there would be more engagement with China. Even earlier, 73 days Doklam standoff, when China wasn't clear whether India is coming for the Xiamen Brics Summit. It's only then that China agreed to a disengagement. So
Gaurav, just wanted to quickly interrupt you to tell our viewers that the bilateral meeting has started. We've got a confirmation from Gaurav and his team on the ground that the bilateral meeting between Prime Minister Modi and President Xi Jinping has just begun, and Gaurav will be sending us the first pictures in just a moment from now. So we can confirm that after over 5 years, Modi and Xi Jinping are in the same room meeting with each other one-to-one. It's a bilateral. They've got their teams with them. The meeting has just begun. It's a big milestone moment, viewer. Expectations and reality are something that are very much being kept in mind by the Indian side and doubtless from the Chinese side as well. But the fact that these two leaders representing two countries that have been in a military standoff, in a war-like situation for 4.5 years and counting means that some forward movement is to be expected. Gaurav, confirmation coming in that bilateral has begun.
Yes, Shiv, we've just got a word from those there that the bilateral between India and China has started at 15:02 local time. That's 2 minutes earlier. This message has come in that the bilateral meeting has started. It's likely to be anything between 30 to 40 minutes. If it goes on longer, then there are indications that the two sides have more issues to discuss and perhaps bridges, hopefully bridges to build. But what will those bridges be, and will those bridges only be built once China understands that fact that there has to be peace and tranquility and stability at the borders, which would mean disengagement, de-escalation and then de-induction. De-induction looks like a very, very tall order. But Shiv, before de-induction, there's another important aspect that India wants to put across. And since you and I cover the armed forces, equal and mutual security. Equal and mutual security would mean China is in a position to induct its troops faster because they have better infrastructure in the area. So that is why India would have to keep larger number of soldiers closer to the border until that trust factor can be rebuilt, so that equal and mutual security is something that the two sides have sparred on really multiple times at the military level talks. And India has been able to send across that message that China will have to de-induct even further for the time it takes its troops to once again come back to the borders. Also, China in the past, they would leave their military hardware and only take their soldiers back, and next year come back, use the same military hardware to move forward from their training area to their op area or operational area. So this time even that infrastructure, the military hardware has to move back to the peacetime location. So there are these nitty-gritties that are also being worked out. And if I may just add a quick point from what I've been able to pick up from our sources, Shiv, patrolling so that it doesn't lead to another Pangong Tso or Galwan kind of an incident. 4 weeks in a month, it's being split into 2 weeks. That's one of the formulas that's been agreed to. Let's say week 1, India patrols up to our patrolling points. Week 2, the Chinese come up to their claim line. Week 3, once again, we patrol to those to our claim line. Week 4, once again, they come to their claim line. That way, there's no accidental patrols meeting each other or any fisticuffs. They inform each other. It will be a section plus platoon minus. So section plus means 10 to 14 soldiers. Platoon minus means less than 23 soldiers. So anything between 10 and 15 soldiers, they will only go. So and they will inform the other side. So these are some of the nitty-gritties that have either been agreed to or talked about. Higher direction of war from the leadership is what is required at this stage, Shiv, is what sources are telling India today.
Absolutely crucial granular details that Gaurav is sharing, the kind of formula for the patrolling that will take place between both sides, which will be the very first step towards a much larger unfolding formula that will hopefully over the weeks and months and perhaps even years lead to a normalization of military relations on the border. It's going to be crucial to see that Modi and Xi are meeting right now. As we bring you this live broadcast, not very far from where Gaurav is standing in Kazan, Modi and Xi are in a closed room meeting right now. They'll be in that meeting room for about 30 to 40 minutes, after which there will be a press conference by the Indian side with details about the discussion and hopefully more details about precisely how this resolution and this convergence of intent between India and China for the first time in 4.5 years will actually unfold. It's good news, but there is a great deal of cautious optimism as well, considering India's experience as far as China is concerned in the past.